I'm looking forward to this.
Me too, man. Yeah, it's
I
great
enjoy
to
your
meet you.
show,
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Flavor of
and I enjoy
loves.
your interviews.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, hey man, you got a lot going on right now. Spring comes early, but before that, I'm curious, how did you get through this pandemic period as an artist, and how has it changed you? And probably how does it feel to have an album out now?
Um, my experience of COVID, because I've been a freelancer all my working life, working alone,
Yeah.
is that it was a period of creativity, and I really experienced that with a lot of my colleagues and friends as well as a lot of the production work kind of slowed down. I was primarily involved in scoring for television and that kind of thing. Um, these folks just returned to why they got into music in the first place and started writing for themselves. And the quality of what they were writing, instead of trying to do another action trailer, um, they were writing stuff that they felt, and the quality went through the roof.
Yeah.
So I found it to be, and I'm a bit sheepish about saying this, but I found it to be a period of increased creativity. And I watched one of your interviews with Jesse Dietschy, who I don't know personally,
Yeah.
but he talked about this as well, and my experience was very much like his. So I know that wasn't everybody's experience, and I'm not primarily a performer, so I didn't experience that kind of drying up. I've always seen myself much more as a writer than a player.
So talk to me about how this album feels. What does this mean to have new material out and to kind of create this? Just I mean, just coming out of what we've lived through. What does it mean?
Yeah, so it was a coincidence of timing because in the fall, just before COVID hit, I had decided that my days of only chasing freelance work were done, and I feel awfully privileged to be in that position. And that I was going to, on January 1st, I was going to sit down at my desk and I was going to see what happened. And I had no idea what was going to happen. And I started writing some jazz heads, but going back to bands that were part of my formative years. I don't know if you remember a band from the 80s called Oregon.
Yeah.
Fabulous. I don't even know what to call it. Fusion, I guess, but um, they had a big impact on me. So I wrote a tune kind of in the style of Oregon, my take on it, and I had no intention of recording. I had no intention, certainly no intention of putting out a record. And then a year later, I put out the first COVID record, my first COVID record.
Yeah.
Um, and then when that was done, and I was wondering what I would do next, I really feel like all of us kind of gravitate at some point back to what we loved when we were 18 or 25. It's why we still listen to the Beatles.
Yeah.
And um, that for me was the music of Bill Evans, Ahmad Jamal, early Miles,
Yeah.
and my parents had a wonderful record collection. Their music was the big band music of the 30s and 40s, but they also had some more contemporary, 1950s stuff, and that's where I heard all this first. Peterson, Oscar Peterson, and then I was going to hear people like Sarah Vaughan and Betty Carter, and that was kind of my music.
Yeah.
And so when I decided to do another record and go back to my own roots, that's what you hear for the most part. There are a couple of tunes that are outliers, but that's for the most part what you're hearing on this record is the music that I still hear most naturally for me.
So what are you ultimately hoping the listener gets from this album?
Um, Accessible, beautifully performed music, and I could say that because most of the performance was people other than me. Um, um, that's solidly in the jazz domain, um, and has a lot of heart behind it. There are two tunes on there. The first and last tune on the record are dedicated to friends who are passed, and so that, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did this journey begin for you? How did you get into the music, more specifically jazz? How did that happen? But where you were born and raised too.
I'm born and raised in Toronto,
Okay.
and I started listening to a lot of stuff other than the people I mentioned. I was listening to Chicago and Blood, Sweat, and Tears, but I really wanted to go hear concerts with their jazz stuff, and they never played that stuff in concert. They played all the rock and roll, and
Yeah.
it's always hard for me. But um, uh, I when you've been writing other people's music for 35 years, um, it can be really tough to know who the hell you are,
Yeah.
and and what it is that you have to say. And I have a really good friend who just quit the rat race, moved out to the country, built a beautiful studio, and he told me he sat down there on the first day and he had no idea who he was. And so these two records are a chance for me to go back and find out who I am and what I care about. I always cared about the music that I wrote for other people, but very differently.
Yeah.
You go into a studio, was it a clean take? Did everybody get their stuff right? Great, let's move on. On these records, yeah, we've played it 5 times and it's been perfect, but it isn't music yet. So let's do it again.
Yeah.
And I forget what your question was, but um, that's kind of what I've returned to, and it's been a wonderful experience.
Yeah. No, you got to the essence of what I was looking at. What was the first real true jazz show you saw that blew you away?
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I thought about it, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, when I was in my late teens and early 20s, there were still piles of jazz clubs in Toronto. And we had this wonderful venue, which was called Ontario Place. It was an outdoor venue in the round. The stage rotated as the artists were playing, and it was free. And I heard Peterson, Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, the Boss Brass, which
Oh,
which I just love the Boss Brass.
yeah.
Love the way that style of big band writing, and um, and then in the clubs I was going to hear Betty Carter. Just my head exploded when I
Yeah.
heard Betty Carter,
Yeah.
and and those were the kinds of things, and our own Mo Kaufman,
Yeah.
who was a fixture in town.
Yeah.
So it could have been any of those things.
Sure.
I really don't remember. I think the most electrifying concert I ever went to was actually much later. Ahmed Jamal, who
Yeah.
he had his minimal period in the 50s, kind of went maximum for
Yeah.
a while, and as he was coming back to minimal, that's when I heard him, and it was just electrifying.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you talk about doing all of these things for other artists and you had a hard time figuring out who you were. Ultimately, what did you figure out throughout that time? Because all of the things that you were doing led to you finding you. What did you see in your evolution that was promising, that was hopeful, that made you feel like, all right, this is it. I got it. I'm doing my own thing.
I think it was something a little more general than that. um, I finally felt like I knew something. Finally felt like um, I had something to say, but more importantly, I knew how to say it. I had a certain amount of technique at my fingertips. I went to school as Jesse did, and I taught high school music in a former lifetime. Um, but I had some tools. I also knew what I didn't know, which I think is really important. And um, there were people that I had worked with over the years whom I'd asked to do things that were not necessarily what they would want to be doing. And one of the best examples, singer Dave Blaemeyers, who sang with Pat Metheny, he was a jingle singer in town, and I met him a pile of years later, and we had a beer on a dock, and I apologized to him for all the crap that I made him sing when I was writing commercials. But but it was but I had these people that I had worked with in different um, settings, and I just wanted to do something with them that was really what they do, and as a way of just saying thank you and here are my little tunes. Let's see what happens. And that I'm used to scoring everything because that's what you do when you're writing for TV. And this was an opportunity for me to just pull back a little bit and take my hands off the reins and just see what happened. And lots happened on this and the last record that I didn't expect. Some of it I didn't even like at first because it was so different than what I'd had in my head.
Yeah.
And just that, Jesse talked about vulnerability, the vulnerability of performing improvisatory music. When you walk into a studio as a composer and you're just giving folks chord symbols after the head's over, it's almost the same kind of thing. It's improvisatory. You have no idea what's going to happen. It's going to be your tune with your name on it. So I share that feeling of vulnerability in that situation.
So I'm curious, the one thing that's beautiful about the artist spirit and being a musician is the dreams that we have. There's a dreamer spirit. What was the stage that you always dreamed you would be on? You finally got on it. It was just like, wow, I'm here. Or is there a stage that you want to play on someday?
I had a very short-lived new age piano career in Japan, and I played a concert in a place called Tokyo Opera City, which is the most beautiful hall I've ever been in, on the best piano I ever touched in my life. But as I said before, I don't really see myself as a performer. And unlike real performers, I don't need that as part of my musical experience. I
Yeah.
consider myself a writer. So when I think of what stage do I want to be on, I would think more of what recording stage I want to be on and who's going to be in front of me.
Yeah.
I've been at Abbey Road Studio too, up in the control room, not on the at the podium. That was a treat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, um, but that's where I'm really comfortable. I don't know if you're familiar with video games. There's an indie game called Cuphead.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, Cuphead, the music from Cuphead, I didn't write the music for that. I worked with the composer. I mentored him on writing for big band because it was all in a really wacky 1930s big band style. But I also conducted the recording sessions with some of the best musicians in this country because the music was so hard. And I love that role. I
yeah.
really like being in that role.
But what's also interesting is, you're writing music for all of these things that people are consuming. Like jazz tends to be a medium where it's not major, it's not mainstream. There's niche audiences that go see it, but you're doing things that are getting mass appeal. How does that feel to be in that position, to be able to produce something that's going to go to so many people? Now, they may not know exactly who you are, but
Yeah.
they're tapping their foot to what you're making. How does all of that conglomeration feel for you?
I wish I had an answer that perpetuated the mystique, but I don't.
Yeah.
There's a job that needs to be done when you walk into a studio, and it has to be done within the hour or the day or whatever it is, and it has to be done to a certain quality. And a uh, a session has to be timed paced well, I really think about the job at hand. I think as soon as you start thinking about how many people might see this, I think you just freak yourself out, and it's a distraction.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's kind of cool that I'm talking to you in Kansas City,
Yeah.
and I'm new in the jazz world. I'm not known in the jazz world, and there's a part of me that figures, what the hell am I doing talking to this guy in Kansas City? And I think that many of us share that kind of feeling. So you know what, I don't really think about it. I did a lot of work for the Solitudes people. They put out a gazillion nature effects in music records in the 90s, 80s and 90s. And I happened to know the folks who were doing it, and I made 45 records for them. Collectively, those records sold in the tens of millions of copies. It never occurred to me to even think about that when I
Yeah.
was doing it. I had to get the job done.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's but you put yourself into it. You hope you're being honest, and even if you're churning it out, you try to
Yeah.
make it have integrity.
So every day you wake up, you're a creative. You get to create something. What is the best part of what you do? What do you look forward to the most?
Hmm. I think any day that I come away at the end of it thinking that I've done something that's as good as I can do it, whatever that means, and that I haven't just skated on past experience, but that I've really tried to do something that pushes me a bit, that's a good day. I love I love the art of mixing. It took me long time to mix this record because to me it's part of the creative process. I can do a 3-hour mix, but that's a technical job.
Yeah.
um, I do enjoy that a lot. A day that I get to the end of it and I don't want it back is a good day.
Yeah.
It means I've done something that mattered.
Yeah. So why do you love jazz?
Jazz to me is a really neat blend between being a cerebral art, much in the way that classical music is other formal or more formal art forms, and a joyful, emotional, expressive art. And the second part of that gets lost, I think, on people that don't have much experience with jazz, because jazz isn't pop music,
Right.
and um, they it can seem devoid of emotion to some people. It just sounds clever. But when you start to get inside, you understand that it's not about being clever at all. It's there might be some jokes. If you know the repertoire, you hear the little reference to some other tune, and yeah, that's really cool. But it's a very emotional art, and I think what I like is that blend of the cerebral, the technical, and the beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. If everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, fans, clients, everyone that you deal with, but you ultimately run it, you're in control. What's
Yeah.
your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I'm a little on the perfectionist side of things. Uh, um, I like to talk. I'm sure you've already noticed that when I have something to say. But as a musician and a composer and the guy that stands at the front of the room, I really would like to think that I'm respectful and grateful. Um, certainly the people that played on this record, um, I think they get that from me, that I really I respect their art, and I respect the fact that I may have called them in as a sideman, but they are solo artists in their own right, and they need that space, and they also need to be contained. And um, I would hope that that comes across. I don't have I hope I don't have outsized um an outsized opinion of the profundity or otherwise of what I write. It's just what I hear, it's who I am, but that I'm doing it honestly and not in a derivative sort of way, although this music is definitely of a time period.
Yeah.
And but but it's not like I said I think I'll write an Evans tune. It's just it's what I hear.
Yeah.
And so I hope that that comes through.
Yeah. So I had a dream last night that baseball started already. And I was like, wait, the World Series just ended. So your album title is perfect right now.
Yeah. That's great, man.
It actually happened. And it just
That's
hit me
great.
when I was thinking about it. I was like, maybe I just knew we were going to talk, and I expedited all the seasons in my brain because we're going through kind of a weird, it feels like spring here. It should be
Yeah.
really cold. Everything should be in a kind of a thaw, but it's kind of like the birds are making sounds like spring. So it's really weird. We've orchestrated a scenario that's perfect for your album and our
Oh,
discussion right now.
that's fantastic. That's
Hey,
great.
so if anyone wants to pick up the album, best place to go, anything about you and your world, where can they go?
Um, Probably my website, johnherberman.com. They can listen to the record. It's up there to be listened to for nothing. The other record is also up there. It doubles as a screen composer site. They can ask to buy the record if they want to. We're in a very strange time because nobody has CD players anymore.
No.
If you're 25, you have a turntable, but
Yeah.
only if you're 25.
Yeah.
And so what do? Give people a link? That's no gift.
There's no romanticism in that.
None.
Yeah.
None.
So you know what I do when I get all these CDs as a jazz radio guy?
What's
I give
that?
them out to kids at Halloween, and they're like, what is this? And I'm like, just go home and find a CD player, find somebody that has it. But I caught some people this year that are like, oh yeah, I play an instrument, I'm into it. And I was like, here, you need Oscar Peterson. And I'm just doling it out. So it's good.
Well, that's a great thing to do. I would probably add, and if you don't like it or can't find a CD player, your dad might be able to get it in his circular saw. It might
Absolutely.
go in there, and I don't know what'll happen, but
Exactly.
Yeah.
At least you can have some fun with it.
That's right.
Hey, man, this has been great, John. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your candor. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. I really appreciate you having me on.